Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to put together this quick recording for you in regards to what we were going to cover last night. So it's important for me to make sure that these things are covered and that you have a good understanding about this stuff moving forward. So I'm just going to touch on a few key things that I wanted to do last night. The very first one, again, we've been talking about how to set up a group moving forward, and we've talked about the beginning stage in terms of things like icebreakers, in terms of building cohesion, coming up with how we are going to set up our group, screen our group, things along those lines. Now, moving forward is a very important aspect, if not the most important, which is what we do within those middle sessions. So for an example, if we've got a group that's meeting for 10 times, we would concentrate on the beginning part of group, maybe the first, maybe two or three, maybe the first two in terms of that, and then we'd have that good chunk right there in the middle that we would call our middle sessions. And this is where we look to really attack some of those overall goals and those objectives moving forward. Now, just like with the beginning stage, we want to make sure that we have good leadership skills and techniques that may be just a little bit different than what we have demonstrated in the beginning. One of the big things, if you guys remember me talking about, is simply using progress reports. So making sure that we're keeping good case notes in terms of understanding where we're going in terms of our overall goals and those objectives. And if you guys remember, based upon our discussions, those things need to change. Ideally, based upon what was accomplished within that particular group, we know, unfortunately, these things don't tend to happen, but best practice is that those case notes, those progress reports need to change based upon what is demonstrated within that session. We need to have a good introducing topics discussion so that we're bringing or at least processing or chunking or kind of chipping away at the ice in terms of what we're going to be doing. We need to make sure that we vary the format. You guys know, just like anyone else, when we tend to do the same exercises over and over again, we're going to lose people. So we want to try to change the format up, not only just within maybe the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth session, but even within those individual sessions. I'm going to give you guys an example of that just in a second. We want to do things in terms of using our voice, using our nonverbals, using things that we've been talking about in terms of this impact therapy, where we want to make sure that things are very hands-on. We want to make sure that the person is not just sitting back and in hopes taking in this information. We want to make sure that people are very involved with what's going on. We also want to make sure that if it's not us, it's at least somebody that is meeting with the members individually. So we often see this when we're talking about in an inpatient setting or in an outpatient facility where it may be a hospital or a non-for-profit. We don't just necessarily want people, and I'm talking specifically about clinical groups, where people come in, they process, and then they simply just leave. We want to make sure that as the group leader, we're at least setting aside time outside of a group to meet with those individuals to process on a one-on-one level. If not, that they at least have an individual clinician who is also following up on their progress in terms of what they're doing within that group. One of the big things that I've done a pretty poor job emphasizing is, just like within an individual session, in group sessions, we need to make sure that we're giving people adequate time in terms of termination. We want to make sure that if it's a 10 session group, that on group 10, we're not informing them that it's ending. We want to make sure that they know a good advance, a couple weeks, maybe a month at the most, that group will be ending. So it gives them good enough time to be able to process that and to be able to bring up any other issues that may be going on within their life. It's just like an individual session. So if you've got an hour or 45 minutes, you don't go straight 45 minutes or 60 minutes. You always want to leave yourself time at the end because you never know when something's going to be brought up in terms of that. Now, This is what I was going to spend a lot of time with you guys last night. And unfortunately, I had a personal matter come up, so I was unable to do it. So I'm going to kind of crash course through this. This is addressed in your book very, very nicely. But how is it that we look at, or how do we process that middle group stage? So this is just an example. The need for approval. So this would be your group topic. Okay. So when you go into those middle stages, just like your book identifies, you as the group leader need to make sure that you're aware of key issues, okay, in terms of they're going to be covered or may possibly come up during those middle sessions. So things such as sources of approval. So for this topic, the people in your group, that's why they're there. So the need for approval, they all struggle with that. So where are those sources coming from? Is it friends? Is it parents? Is it a significant other? Is it their kids? Where does the need for approval come from? So why is it that your client or your group needs that approval? What is the underlying structure, or what is kind of the underlying reason for that, particularly involving those individuals? How do people seek approval? So not only the sources, where this need comes from, but how do we go about getting it, right? So is it through positive means? Is it through negative means? Do we tend to self-sabotage? What's going on with that? How strong is this need? Whenever I talk about this, the thing that kind of immediately pops up in my head is self-esteem. I hate that word. I'll get into details about that later. Self-confidence is probably a little bit better word. But how strong is it? Does this person solely depend on the approval of others to be healthy? Can this person find it within themselves in terms of being healthy without having approval from other people? You know, how strong is this need? And that's obviously going to dictate some of the things that you do within group. Positive and negative ways that people seek approval. Again, kind of going back up again. So what is it that we do currently? What are some things in which we have done in the past? What were some of the consequences of that? And again, these are just things that we're keeping in our head before we've even gone into these sessions. So what are some things that may come up? Trusting oneself. What we mean by that is this idea of trusting our feelings, our emotions. How is it that we perceive the actions of others? Where is that coming from? How does that impact us? Is the person considered independent? Are they very dependent? So one of the things in which we have talked about is the high percentage of people with personality disorders who also have or qualify for an addiction. It's right around 90%. So one of the personality disorders that kind of screams out to me is dependent personality disorder. So is this someone who solely their whole identity is based upon the approval of others? Or are we looking for someone that has good independence within themselves, and how can we use those skills to help that person in terms of their overall means of approval? How to reduce approval-seeking behavior. Now, there's nothing wrong with asking for people's opinions. There's nothing wrong with getting good feedback. But again, when we talk about those 4 Ds of abnormality, we're talking about abnormal behavior. To what extent does this approval-seeking behavior cause us distress? To what extent does this approval-seeking behavior become deviant? How much dysfunction is it causing us, or our clients better yet, in terms of their living, their working, their social, or their school environments? And then the last one down here, we haven't touched on theory yet, we're going to, but it's how do we use very specific theoretical perspectives to address these issues, these key issues? So things like cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy, rational behavioral therapy, that's REBT, or transactional analysis, that's the TA. Or how does attachment theory come into play in terms of why we have this need for approval? So as you guys know, attachment is widely accepted within the field that attachment has, or lack of attachment, has a very high correlation with mental health and addiction. So how does that missing component in terms of being a kid or growing up contribute to these things? So once we have a good understanding of the key issues moving forward, now we can start going into our middle stages of our group. And these are just a variety of different things in which you guys can do within your groups. And again, this is addressed within your book. So those introductory exercises, okay? We're not talking about a 10 scheduled group, okay? We're not talking about the first and the second group. We're talking about those middle stages now. When we start chipping away and start really attacking the things in which we're there for, we need to ease our way into that topic. So introductory exercises, rounds, dyads, triads. Again, those are the most important exercises or techniques you're going to use within your groups. So rounds, how important is it to you in terms of the approval of others, 1 to 10? Dyads, discuss early experiences in your family. Did you feel you were approved of? How does that affect your current functioning? Rounds, whose approval do you seek and how do you seek it? And again, you can see within these rounds and these dyads, these are very easy ways to get the entire group involved, right? You could even do something along the lines of, say one word or a very short sentence in regards to your thoughts on approval, or how is it that approval positively impacts you or negatively impacts you. Written exercise, list people whose approval is important to you, arrange them in order of importance, discuss this within groups. Sentence completion or rounds, I often use these because they're very structured, they're very guided. If my parents did not approve of me, I would do what? If I sensed disapproval, I would. If my spouse or lover did not approve of me, I would. Now, the key thing with sentence completion rounds or one-word rounds or even sentence rounds is you really want to make sure, or at least emphasize, and again, everybody's on a different functioning level or intellectual level, is you want to say the first thing that comes to your mind, right? If you're allowed to sit there and think and process sometimes, you may think of a very PC answer. You may be influenced by other people within the group. So you really want to stress that you want to be honest with yourself in terms of understanding and identifying these beliefs in order to move forward. Your book also does a great job in terms of talking about deepening rounds, dyads, and exercises. And again, this is where people bring up those things within the introductory exercises, and now we really deepen the focus. We really start to center in and concentrate on what exactly is behind the stuff in which you said. Now, the one probably biggest mistake that counselors make when we're talking about deepening exercises is concentrating on one person. Okay, so we really want to make sure that even when one person is sharing, that the whole group is involved, right? We also want to make sure that we as the group leader are using our nonverbals appropriately. I think we've all been in a class before or where there was a presentation that needed to be done, and whoever was presented it to that one person. You guys know what I mean, where they just stare at the one person which they're comfortable with. We don't want to do that as group leaders. So we want to make sure that we're scanning the room, we're using eye contact, we're using our nonverbals to make sure that everybody's involved and we're keeping that good cohesion. So our rounds, our dyads, our written exercises, or even role plays. So the need for approval is a desire, a necessity, or a burden. Pick one. Written exercise. Make a list of gains, losses that have resulted from your approval-seeking behavior. So someone may identify something that they may have done with somebody. Okay, great. You did that one group. Now this next group. What were the pros and cons of that? So you can see we're kind of digging a little bit deeper into better understanding that. Round or movement exercises. So respond, strongly agree, strongly disagree, and so forth. Approval from others is more important to me than self-approval. Now, what's interesting about this is if you do these types of movement exercises where you have to move around the room, it puts a little bit more responsibility on that person in terms of really truly identifying and sharing the ways in which they feel. And this is great because it could set up your role play, so to speak. Members experience disapproval. Members experience nonverbals regarding disapproval. Now, what we mean by that is, and you have to be very, very careful with role plays. Typically, I often encourage that the clinician actually does the role play with the client versus the client doing it with the group members, because sometimes the group members can simply just be really mean and not necessarily have the client's best interest. So with members experience disapproval, maybe you as the therapist may role play with that person. Maybe they took a test, maybe they've got something important coming up, and you express disapproval, right? I mean, PC disapproval. You're not like, trashing the person. So what do they experience when they hear those words? What are their thoughts when they hear those words? Where can they go moving forward? Another great one is nonverbals. So you guys have heard me say this 1,000 times. Nonverbals don't lie. So standing in front of the person and maybe having your arms folded, maybe kind of having your hands like this, having a confused look on your face while the person's talking. What do they feel like watching you do that? What thought processes do they have in their head? Where can they go with that? Again, what we're trying to do within these deepening rounds, dyads, and exercises is to dig a little bit deeper so that this person has a very good understanding in terms of what's kind of going on with that. And again, we're doing this within a group setting. Everybody can see it. Everybody can give feedback, positive feedback, or at least constructive criticism. Now, within your groups, okay, and your book touches on this a little bit, you guys have all heard about these in terms of the stages of group, okay? So the stages of group, very simply, we're talking about the beginning stage, I had mentioned earlier, the working stage, which is what we just talked about, those middle rounds, okay? And this is where members focus on the purpose. This is the most important part. And then we have the closing stage. So if we've got that 10 session group, the beginning would probably be the first 2, maybe 3. The working, maybe 4 to 8, maybe 4 to 9. And the closing, maybe 9 and 10. Okay? And the exercises and the things in which you do are going to be addressed based upon these stages of group. Okay? Now, again, one of the things, you can see it here, termination cannot be emphasized enough. You want to, if you've got a 10-person or a 10-session group, right around maybe 8, maybe 7, 9, maybe too late, you want to make sure they know termination is coming up in terms of that. All right. So I know that was kind of quick. I know that was kind of fast. I mean, obviously, if I had you guys last night, I'm sure there would have been tons of conversation and tons of questions in terms of these things. But when we're talking about the middle group, okay, we're talking about those like 3, 4, 5, up to 7, 8 sessions. We want to make sure we have good introductory, right, in terms of what the topic is. We want to slowly start chipping away in terms of using our dyads, using our triads, using different types of exercises. As I mentioned before, I've been pounding it in your guys' heads. We got to make sure that we're being very impact therapy in terms of our exercises and our techniques to make sure people are just not sitting back and taking information through osmosis. They got to be involved. They got to be using their hands. They got to be using materials. They got to be using, balls or rubber bands, or moving around the room, or doing written exercises, or breaking people up into groups. By doing those things, it's going to increase our ability to dig a little bit deeper. It's going to build some cohesion, and you're going to see that good therapeutic process really take off in terms of that. Now, again, I'm going to post a couple more additional support videos for you guys as we move forward. Please contact me individually if you have any very specific questions about what we just covered tonight. And again, I believe it's in chapter 12. They do several of these different exercises that we just went over with the approval group. I think one of them is based on like self-esteem. Another one I think is on intimacy, sexual intimacy, something along those lines. But it gives a good examples in terms of that. All right, cool. I hope you guys have a great week. My sincere apologies again for last night, and I will definitely speak with you guys soon.